Commander Garland felt the cold bite of metal restraints against his wrists as he was marched through the gleaming corridors of the Zitharan Palace. The journey from the battlefield to this alien capital had been a blur of humiliation and pain, but he had maintained his composure throughout. Even now, with his uniform torn and stained with both human and Zitharan blood, he walked with the straight-backed dignity of a military leader. The palace interior was a jarring contrast to the war zone he'd left behind. Crystal formations jutted from polished obsidian floors, casting prismatic light across the vaulted ceilings. Guards with iridescent armor flanked him, their faces expressionless, beneath helmets that seemed to flow like liquid metal. Everything about the Zitharan aesthetic spoke of evolution far beyond human capability, organic technology that breathed and pulsed with life. "Keep moving, human!" One guard snarled, shoving Garland forward, as he paused to absorb the enormity of the central chamber they had entered. This was clearly the throne room, though it bore little resemblance to the human equivalent. Instead of a single elevated seat, a circular platform hovered at the center, surrounded by concentric rings of courtiers and dignitaries. The air hummed with an energy that made the hair on Garland's arms stand on end, and the faint scent of ozone mixed with something floral and alien. And there she was. Queen Theline of the Zitharan Empire stood on the central platform, her slender figure draped in material that seemed to capture and amplify the light around her. Her skin held the characteristic blue-silver sheen of her species, but her features were sharper, more defined than the Zitharans Garland had faced in battle. Most striking were her eyes, completely black except for pinpoints of violet light that seemed to pierce directly into his soul. "Commander Garland of the Earth Coalition Forces," announced a court official in surprisingly perfect English. "Captured during the Battle of Proxima Centauri, responsible for the destruction of 17 Zitharan vessels and the deaths of over 3,000 Imperial citizens." Theline's expression didn't change as she surveyed Garland. Her voice when she spoke was melodic but cold. "The infamous Commander Garland, your tactical brilliance has cost my empire dearly." She moved closer, descending gracefully from her platform until she stood just feet away. "Did you expect a quick death on the battlefield that would have been too merciful?" Garland met her gaze steadily. "I expected nothing, Your Majesty. I served my people as you serve yours." A ripple of murmurs spread through the court at his audacity in addressing her directly. "Your people," Theline spat the words, "have encroached on our territories, extracted resources from our ancestral planets, and refused every diplomatic overture until war became inevitable." "History will remember differently," Garland replied quietly. The Queen's eyes flashed. "History is written by the victor's commander, and today that is not you." She turned to address her court. "The human commander will serve as an example. Tomorrow at dawn, he will face Kova in the Judgment Circle." The reaction was immediate. Gasps and excited whispers rippled through the assembled aliens. Garland saw fear and anticipation on their faces. "Who or what is Kova?" he asked one of his guards. The guard smiled cruelly. "Not who." "What? Kova is the royal guardian beast, genetically engineered to protect the royal bloodline and obey only their commands. It has torn apart enemies of the crown for generations." For the first time since his capture, Garland felt genuine fear curl in his stomach. He'd heard rumors of Zitharan bioweapons, creatures that were part machine, part engineered lifeform, but had dismissed most as propaganda. A tall, gaunt Zitharan with elaborate facial markings stepped forward from the Queen's inner circle. "Your Majesty," he said with a deep bow, "a fitting end for the human who has caused our empire such grief. Shall I prepare the arena for public viewing?" "Yes, Lord Vexer." Theline nodded. "Let all citizens witness what happens to those who challenge our dominion." Lord Vexer's lips curved into a thin smile as he looked at Garland. "It will be a spectacle worthy of your reign, my queen." As Garland was led away to the holding cells beneath the palace, he caught a final glimpse of Queen Theline. Despite her imperious demeanor, He thought he detected something beneath the surface, not just hatred or vengeance, but a deeper pain. It was gone in an instant, as she turned away, her attendants swarming around her like exotic birds. The prison cell was unlike any Garland had seen. Rather than Poisson or force fields, he was contained within what appeared to be a living membrane, translucent and slightly pulsing. It was disconcertingly comfortable, with a bed that conformed to his body and atmospheric controls that maintained perfect temperature and humidity. Even the food delivered through a section of the membrane that temporarily became permeable was tailored to human physiology while maintaining Zitharan aesthetics. Civilization at its most advanced, Garland thought bitterly, still prioritizes comfortable executions. He had no illusions about his chances against whatever this Kova creature might be. His military training had prepared him for capture torture and even death, but being fed to some bioengineered beast as a public spectacle was not covered in Earth Coalition protocols. Sleep came fitfully, his dreams haunted by fragmented memories of the battle that had led to his capture, the desperate stand at Proxima Centauri, watching his flagship shattered by Zitharan pulse weapons, the chaos of evacuation, and then the sudden ambush that had separated him from his escape pod. His last conscious thought before falling into restless slumber was of Earth, blue and distant, unaware that one of its highest-ranking commanders now awaited execution in an alien palace. Dawn on Zytheria brought not the gradual lightening of Earth's skies, but an abrupt transition as the planet's binary stars crested the horizon simultaneously. Garland was already awake when guards arrived to escort him to what would almost certainly be his death. The arena was vast, a circular pit with high walls that sloped upward to accommodate thousands of Zitharan spectators. The seats were already filled, the crowd buzzing with anticipation. At one end, an elevated platform held Queen Theline and her court. Lord Vexer stood at her right hand, occasionally leaning close to whisper something that made her nod slightly. Garland was led to the center of the arena floor and left standing alone. His restraints had been removed, a small courtesy that made little difference. There was nowhere to run. Queen Theline rose and the crowd fell silent immediately. People of Zytheria. Her voice carried effortlessly across the arena. Today, we witness justice for our fallen. This human Commander Garland has been responsible for countless Zitharan deaths. His cunning and ruthlessness have earned him the title Starbreaker among our fleet. She paused, allowing the crowd's anger to build. For these crimes against our empire, he will face the judgment of Kova. At some unseen signal, a section of the arena wall slid open. The crowd's roar was deafening. Something large and shadowy moved within the darkness of the revealed chamber. Kova emerged, and Garland's blood ran cold. The creature defied easy description. It moved with the fluid grace of a predatory cat, but stood twice as tall as a man. Its body seemed to shift between solid matter and something more ethereal, with sections that were clearly mechanical, merged seamlessly with biological components. 6 limbs, 4 powerful legs, and 2 arm-like appendages supported a serpentine torso that culminated in a head that was neither animal nor machine, but something hauntingly in between. Where eyes should be, there were only pulsing orbs of violet energy, the same shade as Queen Theline's. Behold Kova. Lord Vexer announced, guardian of the royal bloodline for 10 generations, engineered to serve only those of pure Zitharan royal descent. The beast circled Garland, moving with unnatural silence despite its size. Garland remained still, knowing that running would only trigger its predatory instincts faster. Instead, he watched its movements, seeking patterns, weaknesses, anything that might give him the slightest chance. Queen Theline stood. Kova, she commanded, execute the enemy of Zytheria. The creature's head snapped toward her voice, its posture changing from stalking to alertness. Then it turned back to Garland, tensing to spring. Garland, operating on pure instinct and with nothing to lose, raised his hand and spoke in a clear, firm voice. Kova, stop. What happened next sent shockwaves through the arena. The beast froze mid-lunge, its body suddenly rigid. A confused sound, part mechanical whir, part animal whine, emanated from its throat as it regarded Garland with those pulsing violet eyes. "Kovai," Garland repeated, hardly believing what was happening. "Stand down." The creature straightened and took 3 steps backward, then settled onto its haunches, watching Garland with what could only be described as expectant attention. The arena erupted in chaos. Spectators were on their feet, shouting in confusion and alarm. Queen Theline stood motionless, her expression a mask of shock and disbelief. Lord Vexor leaned forward, his face contorted with rage and confusion. "Impossible," Vexor shouted. "The beast responds only to royal blood." Theline raised a hand, silencing the crowd with a gesture. Her voice when she spoke was controlled but tight with suppressed emotion. "Bring the human to my private council chamber, and Kova as well." She turned to leave, then paused. "And summon Dr. Ara. Immediately." Guards approached Garland cautiously, as if expecting Kova to defend him. The beast made no move as Garland was escorted from the arena, but it followed of its own accord, padding silently behind the procession that led to the palace's inner sanctum. The council chamber was smaller than the throne room, but no less impressive. A circular table of some material that resembled polished wood, but glowed faintly from within, dominated the space. Queen Theline already sat at its head, her fingers drumming an impatient rhythm on its surface. "Leave us," she commanded the guards. "Except you, Vexor." Lord Vexor took position behind her chair, his tall figure looming menacingly. Kova settled near the door, its enigmatic gaze never leaving Garland. "Explain," Theline demanded, fixing Garland with her penetrating stare. "I can't," Garland answered honestly. "I've never seen this creature before today." "Lies," spat Vexor. "He must have used some human technology to override Kova's bioprotocols. A transmitter or neural disruptor?" "I was searched thoroughly when captured," Garland pointed out. "You found nothing because I have nothing." Theline studied him intently. "In the 1,000-year history of the Royal Guardians, not once has a beast responded to anyone outside the royal bloodline. Not once." The chamber doors slid open, and a female Zetheran entered. Unlike most of her species that Garland had seen, she wore simple attire. A practical tunic over loose-fitting trousers with numerous small tools attached to a belt at her waist. Her face bore minimal markings, and her manner was direct rather than ceremonial. "You summoned me, Your Majesty?" she inquired, bowing briefly. "Dr. Ara." Theline nodded. "We have a situation that requires your expertise. Kova has responded to commands from this human." Dr. Ara's eyes widened as she took in the scene, particularly Kova's relaxed posture near Garland. "Fascinating," she murmured. "And impossible unless—" She trailed off, apparently lost in thought. "Unless what?" Vexor demanded. "Your Majesty," Dr. Ara addressed the Queen, directly ignoring Vexor. "I would need to run comprehensive tests on both the human and Kova to understand this phenomenon." Theline nodded. "You will have whatever resources you require. In the meantime," she turned to Garland. "It seems your execution must be postponed, Commander. Consider yourself a guest of the palace rather than a prisoner, but a heavily guarded guest. You will remain in the royal sector where Kova can be studied interacting with you." "And if I refuse?" Garland asked, testing boundaries. Theline's lips curved in the ghost of a smile. "Then perhaps we will discover whether Kova will protect you from my other guards. Would you care to find out?" Garland inclined his head slightly. "As you wish, Your Majesty." Vexor arranged suitable accommodations for Commander Garland in the East Wing. Post guards, but give him limited access to the palace gardens and library. Dr. Ara will determine the schedule for her examinations. "But Your Majesty," Vexor protested, "keeping an enemy commander in the royal sector is unprecedented. The council will follow my lead." Theline cut him off. "This situation is unprecedented, and I intend to understand it fully before taking further action." As Garland was led away to his new quarters, he glanced back to see Queen Theline watching him with an expression he couldn't quite decipher: curiosity, suspicion. Perhaps both underlaid with something deeper, a fundamental shift in her understanding of what she thought she knew. For the first time since his capture, Garland felt a flicker of hope. Not for escape. He was still deep in enemy territory, but for something he couldn't yet name. A change in the established order, a crack in foundations previously thought unbreakable. And behind him, silent as a shadow, Kova followed. The days that followed established a strange routine. Garland's new accommodations were luxurious by any standard. A suite of rooms with large windows overlooking spectacular crystalline gardens. Guards remained posted at his door, but as promised, he was permitted limited movement within designated areas of the palace. Dr. Ara's examinations were thorough and frequent. She took blood samples from both Garland and Kova, analyzed brain activity patterns when they interacted, and conducted numerous tests involving commands and responses. The beast's behavior was consistent. It obeyed Garland as readily as it did Queen Theline, sometimes seeming confused when their orders conflicted. "It's unprecedented," Dr. Ara told Garland. During one session, her voice hushed with excitement. Kova's species was specifically engineered for single-source loyalty. Its neurological and genetic coding should make this impossible. "Unless that coding recognizes something in me?" Garland suggested. Dr. Ara's expression turned guarded. "That would be highly improbable." Garland noticed these moments, when the doctor seemed on the verge of a revelation only to retreat into scientific caution. She was keeping something from him, but he couldn't determine what. Meanwhile, his interaction with Queen Theline evolved gradually. At first, she observed Dr. Ara's sessions from a distance, cold and analytical. Then she began to participate, comparing Kova's responses to her commands versus Garland's. Eventually, these sessions expanded into broader discussions about their respective cultures and the war that had brought them together as reluctant associates. "Your coalition claims we fired first at the Proxima settlement," Theline said during one such conversation as they walked through the palace gardens, Kova padding silently beside them. "Our historical records show human mining operations had already destroyed sacred Zithran sites on that planet." "Those sites were unidentified and unmarked," Garland countered. "Our surveys showed no indication of previous civilization." "Because you were looking for buildings technology. Zithran sacred sites are living biosystems. You destroyed them while claiming to study them." The revelation gave Garland pause. That information was never shared with Coalition Command. If it had been, would it have mattered? Theline asked, her violet eyes searching his face. Before he could answer, alarms blared throughout the palace. Kova immediately tensed its mechanical components, whirring to life as its biological aspects shifted to combat readiness. "Perimeter breach," Theline announced, receiving information through some unseen communication system. "We need to—" The explosion cut her off, ripping through a section of garden wall approximately 50 meters from where they stood. Debris rained down as smoke billowed from the breach. "Assassins!" Theline hissed, reaching for a weapon concealed in her robes. Garland reacted instinctively, tackling the queen to the ground as energy blasts scorched the air where she had stood a moment before. Kova roared, a sound like thunder overlaid with digital distortion, and launched itself toward the attackers emerging from the smoke. "Kova, protect the queen!" Garland shouted, rolling to cover Theline with his body as more energy blasts crisscrossed the garden. The beast responded, immediately positioning itself between them and the attackers, its body absorbing multiple energy blasts that would have been lethal to either human or Zitharan. Palace guards arrived moments later, swarming through the garden and engaging the assassins in combat. In the chaos, Garland kept Theline pinned safely beneath him. Their faces were inches apart, and he was suddenly acutely aware of her alien beauty. The fine structure of her features, the way her violet eyes reflected light in complex patterns. "You're protecting me," she said, sounding surprised. "Why?" "Because right now, you're not my enemy. You're just someone in danger." Something shifted in her expression, a softening, a moment of genuine connection that transcended their roles as captor and captive. It vanished quickly as the sounds of combat intensified, but Garland knew he had glimpsed something significant. The attack was repelled quickly, with most of the assassins captured or killed. Only when palace security confirmed the threat had been neutralized did Garland help Theline to her feet. Kova returned to them bearing minor injuries that were already healing through some remarkable regenerative process. "You saved me," Theline acknowledged as royal guards surrounded her checking for injuries. "Both of you." Before Garland could respond, Lord Vexer arrived with a contingent of elite guards. "Your Majesty, are you harmed?" His gaze fixed accusingly on Garland. "Was the human involved in this treachery?" "Quite the opposite," Theline replied coolly. "Commander Garland protected me, as did Kova. Without them, the assassins might have succeeded." Vexer's expression darkened. "A fortunate coincidence, perhaps, or a calculated move to gain your trust." "Take me to my chambers," Theline commanded, ignoring his insinuation, "and ensure Commander Garland is escorted safely to his quarters. I want increased security throughout the palace, and I want the captured assassins interrogated immediately." As they parted ways, Theline held Garland's gaze for a moment longer than necessary. "We will continue our discussion tomorrow, Commander." The assassination attempt changed the dynamic between them. When they met the following day, it was in Theline's private study, a space filled with ancient texts and holographic displays showing various star systems. The formality that had characterized their previous interactions had diminished, replaced by a cautious but genuine interest. The assassins were members of a radical faction that opposes any contact with humans, Theline explained, gesturing to a security report hovering in the air between them. "They learned of your unique status here and feared it signaled a change in imperial policy." "They're not entirely wrong," Garland observed. "My presence here alive is a deviation from your standard approach to human prisoners." Theline studied him thoughtfully. "Dr. Ara has requested a private audience with me regarding her findings. She seems agitated. Do you know why?" "She's been secretive with me as well. Whatever she's discovered, she's keeping it closely guarded." The Queen activated a communication panel. "Send Dr. Ara in." When the doctor entered, her usual composed demeanor was noticeably absent. She clutched a data tablet to her chest and kept glancing between Garland and Theline with an expression that might have been awe or fear, or both. "Your Majesty," she began, "I've completed my analysis of Commander Garland's genetic structure and its interaction with Kova's recognition systems." She hesitated, seemingly struggling to find words. "Continue, Doctor," Theline prompted. "Commander Garland carries Zitharan genetic markers, specifically markers exclusive to the royal bloodline." The silence that followed was absolute. Garland felt as though the floor had dropped away beneath him. "That's impossible," Theline finally said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I verified it 7 times, Dr. Ara replied, setting her tablet on the table between them. Complex genetic models rotated in the air above it. The markers are diluted, suggesting they're several generations removed, but they are unquestionably present, and they are specifically the markers that Kova is programmed to recognize and obey." Garland stared at the holographic display, trying to process this revelation. How could I possibly have Zitharan royal DNA? Dr. Ara glanced nervously at the Queen before continuing. "There are references in our most classified archives to a program called Stellar Bridge that operated briefly during the reign of Queen Theline's great-grandmother. It was highly controversial and eventually terminated, but it involved genetic exchange with selected human subjects." "Genetic exchange," Garland repeated incredulously. "You mean some of my ancestors were part of a Zitharan experiment?" "Not exactly an experiment," Dr. Ara clarified. More of a diplomatic initiative based on the belief that creating beings with dual heritage could eventually serve as bridges between our species. The program was abandoned when more aggressive factions gained influence in both human and Zitharan governance. Feline had gone very still, her eyes fixed on Garland with an intensity that was almost physical. "You're saying that this human commander carries the blood of my family?" "Yes, Your Majesty," distantly but unmistakably. "Leave us," Feline commanded suddenly. "Both of you, I need time to process this." "Your Majesty?" Vexor's voice came from the doorway where he had apparently been listening. "This information is too sensitive to—" "I said leave us." Feline's voice cracked with an emotion Garland couldn't identify. When they were alone, Feline rose and walked to a large window overlooking the capital city. Garland remained seated, giving her space to absorb the revelation that had shaken them both. "My entire life," she finally spoke her back still to him. "I was taught that humans were fundamentally different, alien in the truest sense, incompatible with our civilization, our values, our very biology." She turned to face him. "Every death I ordered in this war was justified by that belief." "Both sides believed what they needed to believe," Garland said quietly. "War requires enemies, not relatives." "Relatives." She repeated the word as if testing its shape. "Is that what we are, Commander Garland?" "Some form of distant cousins." "I don't know what we are," he admitted. "But I know what we could be." "And what is that?" "The beginning of something different, something better than war." For the first time since he had known her, Queen Feline smiled, a genuine expression that transformed her face from regal to radiant. "You sound like the idealists who created the Stellar Bridge program. It's not a simple path you're suggesting. The worthy ones rarely are." Their conversation was interrupted by a palace aide who entered after a perfunctory knock. "Your Majesty, forgive the intrusion. A human diplomatic vessel has entered orbit and is requesting permission to send representatives to discuss Commander Garland's status." Feline exchanged a look with Garland, something unspoken passing between them. "Grant permission. Prepare the formal reception hall and notify the High Council." After the aide departed, Feline's expression grew serious again. "This could be an opportunity, but Lord Vexor and others will resist any suggestion of reconciliation. The revelation about your genetic heritage will only inflame those who value Zitharan purity above all else." "Then perhaps we should keep it between us for now," Garland suggested. "Focus first on establishing diplomatic relations and let the truth emerge gradually." Feline nodded slowly. "Wisdom in patience." "Very well." She moved toward the door, then paused. "Commander, may I know your given name?" The request surprised him. "Alexander," he replied. "Alexander," she repeated, testing the sound. "I shall see you at the diplomatic reception, Alexander." The name in her melodic voice created a strange intimacy between them, one that lingered in Garland's thoughts long after she had gone. The arrival of the human delegation created a flurry of activity throughout the palace. Garland was provided with a new uniform, similar to his Earth Coalition attire, but crafted from Zitharan materials that adjusted to his body temperature and movement. When he expressed surprise at this courtesy, his attendant explained that he would be presented not as a prisoner, but as an honored guest of the Queen. The diplomatic party was headed by Admiral Vega, a stern woman with a reputation for ruthless efficiency in battle and uncompromising positions in negotiation. Garland had served under her command during the early years of the conflict and knew her to be brilliant, but inflexible, especially regarding Zitharans who had killed her brother in one of the war's first engagements. The reception was a masterpiece of carefully choreographed tension. Zitharan nobles lined the Ipsums of the Great Hall in their finest regalia, while the human delegation, small but imposing in their military dress uniforms, stood rigidly on the opposite side. Queen Feline sat on her hovering throne platform, with Lord Vexor and other high officials arranged around her. Garland was positioned in the unusual role of being between both parties. neither fully with the humans nor accepted by the Zitherans. Only Kova's presence beside him, calm and watchful, gave him any sense of stability in this precarious diplomatic ballet. Admiral Vega stepped forward first. Queen Thieline of the Zithran Empire. I bring greetings from the Earth Coalition. We are here to discuss terms for Commander Garland's release and potential cessation of hostilities in the Proxima sector. Thieline inclined her head slightly. Admiral Vega, the Zithran Empire welcomes this opportunity for dialogue. Commander Garland's unique situation has presented us with an opportunity to reconsider our interactions with humanity. Vega's eyes narrowed slightly as she glanced at Garland. Unique situation. Before anyone could respond, Lord Vexer stepped forward. What Her Majesty refers to is the Commander's unprecedented ability to control the Royal Guardian Beast through technological means, a violation of our most sacred protocols. Garland felt a chill at this deliberate mischaracterization. Vexer was setting a trap trying to derail the fragile diplomatic process before it could begin. I assure you, Admiral. Garland spoke carefully. There has been no technological interference on my part. The situation is more complex. Indeed it is, Vexer continued smoothly. And it raises serious questions about human espionage and biological warfare development. The Commander's apparent control over Kova suggests advanced human infiltration of our most secure systems. The human delegation bristled visibly, and several Zitharan nobles murmured in alarm. Thieline's expression remained impassive, but Garland could sense her tension. Lord Vexer speaks out of turn, she said, her voice cutting through the growing murmurs. Commander Garland's interaction with Kova is being thoroughly investigated by our scientists. We have no evidence of hostile technology or espionage. Vexer bowed deeply, a gesture that somehow managed to convey insolence rather than respect. My apologies, Your Majesty. I speak only out of concern for Imperial security. Admiral Vega studied the interaction with shrewd eyes. Perhaps Commander Garland could explain his perspective on these events. All eyes turned to Garland, who suddenly realized the precarious position he was in. The truth about his genetic heritage could either bridge the divide between humans and Zitherans, or deepen it irreparably, depending on how it was received. Thieline's slight headshake warned him to tread carefully. What I can say is that my interaction with the Royal Guardian was as unexpected to me as to everyone else, he began diplomatically. It has led to valuable cultural exchange and the opening of dialogue that might otherwise have been impossible. Cultural exchange, Admiral Vega repeated skeptically. You were sent to lead a military operation. Commander, not a diplomatic mission. War has a way of reassigning our roles, Admiral, Garland replied. I believe there's an opportunity here for both our peoples. The formal reception transitioned to a banquet where the delegates were strategically seated to encourage conversation between species. Garland found himself placed between Admiral Vega and a senior Zitharan scientist, with Queen Thieline at the head of the table, and Lord Vexer watchfully positioned opposite her. What game are you playing, Garland? Vega asked quietly, as servants delivered the first course. Dishes carefully prepared to accommodate both human and Zitharan digestive systems. You're speaking like a convert. I'm speaking like someone who's seen another perspective, he countered. The Queen is genuinely interested in finding a path to peace. Vega snorted softly. The Queen who ordered the massacre at Europa Station, who personally led the fleet that decimated our colonies in the Belt. That Queen. War makes monsters of us all, Admiral. You've made your share of difficult decisions, too. She didn't deny it, but her expression remained skeptical. The coalition is willing to negotiate for your release, but a broader peace treaty is another matter entirely. The Council doesn't believe the Zitherans can be trusted. Perhaps this meeting could be the first step in rebuilding that trust, Garland suggested. Their conversation was interrupted by a commotion at the far end of the hall. Palace guards were rushing to secure the entrances, and Lord Vexer was speaking urgently to Queen Thieline, whose expression had gone from diplomatic to alarmed. The Queen stood addressing the assembled dignitaries. Esteemed guests, I regret to inform you that there has been a security incident. For your safety, we must adjourn to a more secure location." As if on cue, explosions rocked the palace far closer than the garden attack had been. Ceiling panels crashed down, and the ornate light structures flickered ominously. Chaos erupted. Human delegates reached for weapons they had been required to surrender, while Zitharan nobles scattered in panic. Palace guards attempted to form a protective cordon around Queen Theline, but smoke bombs detonated throughout the hall, reducing visibility to near zero. Garland felt, rather than saw, Kova press against his side. The beast's enhanced senses could penetrate the smoke, and it nudged him urgently toward where Theline had been standing. "Kova, find the queen," he ordered, and the creature bounded forward, Garland following close behind. He found Theline surrounded by a group of masked attackers, wearing the insignia of her own royal guard. The implications were immediate and damning. This was no external threat, but an internal coup. 2 of her loyal guards lay dead at her feet, and she was fighting the remaining attackers with surprising skill, wielding an energy blade that materialized from what had appeared to be decorative bracers on her forearms. "Traitors!" She snarled, her blade slicing through the armor of one attacker. "Vexor's pawns." Kova launched into the fray, its powerful limbs and weaponized appendages making short work of 2 more attackers. Garland seized a fallen guard's weapon, something between a staff and an energy projector, and joined the battle, fighting back to back with the queen he had once sworn to destroy. "We need to get you to safety," he shouted over the din of battle and the continuing explosions that suggested the attack was palace-wide. "The human delegation," Theline responded, deflecting an energy blast. "If Vexor harms them, any hope of peace dies with them." "Kova," Garland commanded, "find Admiral Vega and the human delegation, protect them." The beast hesitated clearly, conflicted by the directive to leave both its recognized masters. "Go." Theline reinforced the command, and Kova reluctantly bounded away into the smoke. More attackers converged on their position. Fighting fiercely, Garland and Theline gradually made their way toward a concealed exit that the queen indicated. They were nearly there when an energy blast caught Garland in the shoulder, spinning him around and driving him to his knees. Theline could have fled then, leaving him to the attackers. Instead, she stood over him, her energy blade creating a defensive perimeter that kept their assailants at bay. "Can you move?" she demanded, her eyes never leaving the circling attackers. "Yes." Garland gritted through the pain, forcing himself back to his feet. Together they reached the hidden passage, which sealed behind them as they entered a narrow corridor, illuminated only by bioluminescent panels along the floor. "This leads to the secure command center," Theline explained as they hurried along the passageway. "From there we can coordinate a response and contact your people." "Vexor planned this," Garland stated, pressing a hand to his wounded shoulder. "He's using the peace talks as cover for a coup." "Yes, he's been undermining me for months, suggesting I've grown weak, too open to human influence." She glanced at him. "Your arrival and Kova's response to you accelerated his plans." The command center was a marvel of Zitharan technology, a circular room with holographic displays showing every section of the palace and surrounding city. Several loyal officers were already there coordinating defense efforts. They snapped to attention as Theline entered. "Report," she commanded. "Cove forces have secured the main palace complex, Your Majesty." A female officer responded. "Lord Vexor is broadcasting that you have been assassinated by human agents, and he has assumed emergency control of the government." "And the human delegation?" "Unknown. Communications are jammed in the reception hall sector." Theline's expression hardened. "Restore palace security systems. I want all loyal forces consolidated and prepared for counterattack." Another officer approached cautiously. "Your Majesty, there's something else. Lord Vexor is claiming that Commander Garland used prohibited technology to control Kova, and that this was part of a human plot to assassinate you and destabilize the Empire." "Convenient narrative," Garland muttered, allowing a medical technician to treat his shoulder wound. blame the humans eliminate the Queen C's power in the chaos. A sudden commotion at the command center entrance drew their attention. The doors slid open to reveal Kova bearing minor battle damage, but otherwise intact. Behind the beast came Admiral Vega and 3 other human delegates escorted by a contingent of loyal Zitharan guards. "Your guardian creature found us just as Vexor's forces were closing in," Vega explained, looking shaken but composed. "It led us through service corridors to safety." Theline inclined her head. "I am relieved you are unharmed, Admiral. What you are witnessing is not sanctioned by the Imperial throne, but is a treasonous action by Lord Vexor and his supporters." Vega's expression was guarded. "So, I gather, the question is, what happens now my ship in orbit is reporting Zitharan vessels moving to offensive positions? Vexor will try to eliminate all witnesses and blame the violence on human aggression." Theline stated, "We must reach the central communications array and broadcast the truth to both our peoples before this erupts into full-scale war." One of the human delegates, a slender man with diplomatic insignia, stepped forward. "With respect, Your Majesty, why should we trust you?" "This could be an elaborate trap." "Because I have nothing to gain from war," Theline replied evenly. "And because of this." She turned to Dr. Ara, who had emerged from another entrance. "Doctor, please share your findings about Commander Garland with Admiral Vega." As Dr. Ara explained the genetic connection, Vega's expression transformed from skepticism to astonishment. "You're saying Garland has Zitharan royal DNA. That's why the beast obeys him." "It's not just that he has Zitharan DNA," Dr. Ara clarified. "The Stellar Bridge program was specifically designed to create individuals who could serve as biological and cultural intermediaries. The genetic markers that Kovo recognizes were deliberately preserved across generations." "Our ancestors knew war would come," Theline said softly. "They tried to prepare a path back to peace." A loud alarm interrupted them as the command center's defense systems activated. "Hostile forces approaching," announced a security officer. "Multiple entry points." "We're out of time," Garland stated, moving to stand beside Theline. "We need to reach that communications array." "It's in the central spire," Theline said, activating a holographic map. "Heavily defended under normal circumstances and now likely under Vexor's direct control." Admiral Vega studied the map. "A direct assault would be suicide. We need a diversion." "Kova Ar." Garland turned to the creature, which had positioned itself protectively near both him and Theline. "Can you create a diversion on the south quadrant while we approach from the north?" The beast made a sound that might have been affirmation. Theline added, "Ibul, Kova can interface with palace systems. It can trigger security protocols remotely, making it appear as though we're attacking from multiple directions." The plan formed quickly. Kova would create chaos in the southern sectors, drawing Vexor's forces away from the central spire. Meanwhile, a combined team of loyal Zitharans and human delegates would escort Theline and Garland to the communications array. "If we succeed," Theline told the assembled group, "we not only save our governments, but potentially end a war that has cost both our species dearly." "And if we fail," asked one of the human delegates, "then Lord Vexor fabricates evidence that humans assassinated the Queen and our species destroys each other." Garland answered grimly, "No pressure." The mission began with Kova slipping away through maintenance tunnels. Its partly mechanical nature allowing it to interface with palace systems and create the illusion of a major assault from the southern quadrant. Alarms blared and security feeds showed Vexor's forces responding exactly as hoped, rushing to counter the perceived threat. The combined human Zitharan team moved swiftly through service corridors toward the central spire. Garland and Theline led the way with Admiral Vega and the remaining human delegates close behind, protected by a detachment of loyal palace guards. They encountered scattered resistance, but overcame it quickly. It was only when they reached the base of the central spire that they faced serious opposition. A full squad of Vexor's elite guards blocking the entrance to the communications center. The battle was fierce but brief. Zitharin and human fought side by side, discovering an unexpected synchronicity in their combat styles. Garland and Theline moved as one unit, covering each other's vulnerabilities with an instinctive coordination that left no opening for their opponents. When the last of Vexor's guards fell, they entered the communications center, only to find Lord Vexor himself waiting along with a dozen more soldiers. How predictable. Vexor sneered, his ceremonial robes replaced by combat armor. The Queen and her human pet coming to make their last stand. This ends now, Vexor. Theline declared, her energy blade humming with power. Surrender, and you may yet live. Vexor laughed. You still speak as though you have authority. The High Council has already recognized my emergency powers. Your words mean nothing now. An elderly Zitharin stepped forward from the shadows behind Vexor, his elaborate facial markings and ornate attire marking him as a senior council member. Not all the council, Lord Vexor, the elder stated firmly. Some of us remember our history too well to be deceived by your manipulations. Vexor's expression darkened. Elder Kazax, you overstep your authority. I reclaim it, Kazax replied, moving to stand between Vexor and Theline. As chief architect of the original Stellar Bridge program, I recognize what you are trying to destroy. The Queen's human ally is proof that our work bore fruit, that coexistence is possible. The revelation sent whispers through the room. Even some of Vexor's guards looked uncertain. You were part of Stellar Bridge? Theline asked, surprise evident in her voice. One of its creators, Kazax confirmed. We sent genetic material to Earth centuries ago, working with human scientists who shared our vision. Commander Garland is a descendant of one of those lineages, proof that our peoples are not as alien to each other as we have been taught. Vexor's face contorted with rage. Genetic abomination! You polluted the royal bloodline with human contamination. We strengthened it, Kazax corrected calmly. Hybrid vigor, Elder Vexor. The same principle that makes Kova such a formidable guardian. The combination of different strengths into something greater than either alone. As if summoned by its name, Kova burst through a side entrance, its massive form immediately placing itself between Theline and danger. The beast bore new battle scars, but moved with undiminished power. The room grew tense as Vexor's guards and Theline's loyalists faced off, weapons ready. The moment stretched, balanced on a knife edge between violence and resolution. It was Admiral Vega who broke the standoff. Stepping forward, she addressed the assembled Zitharins. I came here prepared to negotiate for a single human life. Now I see the possibility for much more. If what Elder Kazax says is true, our peoples have been connected for generations, not just by conflict, but by those who saw beyond it. Garland moved to stand beside her. I don't know what it means that I carry Zitharin royal DNA, but I know what it could mean for all of us, a foundation for understanding rather than destruction. Theline stepped forward, her gaze fixed on Vexor. The choice is yours, Lord Vexor. Continue this path and ensure your place in history as the one who destroyed any chance for peace, or stand down and be remembered as part of a new beginning. For a moment, it seemed Vexor might relent. Then, with a snarl of rage, he drew his weapon and lunged at Theline. Garland and Kova moved simultaneously, Garland tackling Theline out of the path of Vexor's blade, while Kova intercepted the attacking lord. The beast and Vexor crashed into a control console, sending sparks flying as they grappled. Vexor's guards moved to assist him, but Theline's forces and the human delegates blocked their advance. Vexor managed to land a powerful blow that sent Kova staggering backward. The beast recovered quickly, but not before Vexor had targeted Garland with his energy weapon. Die, human contaminant! He screamed, firing directly at Garland's heart. Theline threw herself into the path of the blast. It struck her squarely in the chest, sending her crumpling to the floor. Garland caught her as she fell, horror and disbelief washing over him. Kova's roar of rage echoed through the communications center as it launched itself at Vexer with renewed fury. This time there was no escape for the treacherous lord. Kova's attack was swift and final, ending the threat of Vexer permanently. The room fell silent as Garland cradled Theline's form. Her breathing was shallow, her violet eyes dimming. "Why?" Garland whispered, his voice breaking. "Why would you do that?" A faint smile curved her lips. "Because you were right. About everything. The path to peace. Worth any sacrifice." Dr. Ara rushed to her side, medical instruments already scanning the wound. "The blast damaged her primary cardio system, but if we act quickly, there's a chance." What followed was a blur of frantic activity. Theline was rushed to the Palace Medical Center, where Zitharan healing technology, far beyond human capability, was applied to her grievous injuries. Garland remained by her side throughout his presence, somehow stabilizing Kova, who otherwise grew agitated whenever separated from its injured master. With Vexer dead and Elder Kazax validating Theline's authority, the coup collapsed quickly. Loyal forces regained control of the palace and communications network, broadcasting the truth of what had transpired to both Zitharan and human territories. The revelation of the Stellar Bridge program and Garland's genetic heritage created shockwaves throughout both civilizations. Initial reactions ranged from disbelief to outrage to tentative hope. But as Elder Kazax and other surviving architects of the program came forward with historical records and scientific data, the truth became undeniable. Days later, Garland stood at a window in the Palace Medical Center, watching the twin suns of Cytheria set in a spectacular display of color. Behind him, monitoring equipment hummed softly as it tracked Theline's vital signs. Her condition had stabilized, but she remained unconscious, her body slowly regenerating from injuries that would have been fatal to a human. Admiral Vega entered quietly, coming to stand beside him at the window. "The preliminary peace accords have been approved by Coalition Command," she informed him. "Cessation of hostilities in all sectors exchanges to begin next week, joint scientific committees to explore further genetic connections between our species." "And my status?" Garland asked, though he already suspected the answer. "You're being reassigned," Vega confirmed. "Special diplomatic envoy to the Zitharan court. Your unique heritage makes you the obvious choice." Garland nodded, his gaze returning to the sunset. "And when they ask about my loyalty, whether I represent Earth or Cytheria, tell them the truth." Vega replied simply. "You represent both, by blood by choice and by necessity." After she left, Garland returned to Theline's bedside. Kova lay nearby, its partly mechanical systems in a rest state that resembled sleep. The beast had refused to leave the queen's side, except when Garland was present, creating an unusual rotation of guard duty between them. Garland gently took Theline's hand, studying the delicate blue-silver skin that was so alien, yet somehow familiar now that he understood their connection. "We have a lot to talk about when you wake up," he said softly. "A new empire to build. Not Zitharan, not human, but something better than either alone." He thought he felt a slight pressure from her fingers, but it might have been his imagination. Nevertheless, he continued speaking, sharing his thoughts on the future they might create together, not just as allies or diplomats, but as two beings who had discovered connection where only enmity had existed before. Outside the window, the last rays of sunlight faded, giving way to the spectacular starscape of Zitharan night. In the gardens below, members of both species, human diplomats and Zitharan officials, walked together tentatively, exploring new possibilities for cooperation and understanding. Kova stirred, lifting its head to look first at Theline, then at Garland. In the beast's violet eyes, Garland saw something that transcended its partly mechanical nature, an awareness that had evolved beyond its programming. Like Garland himself, Kova was neither fully one thing nor another, but something new, a bridge between worlds. As if sensing his thoughts, the creature rose and moved to stand beside him, its massive form oddly gentle as it leaned against his side. Together they maintained their vigil over the sleeping queen guardians of a future neither of their species had imagined possible. In the quiet of the medical chamber, with the stars of two civilizations shining overhead, a new era began its tentative first breaths. Not with grand declarations or formal treaties, but with the simple presence of three beings who had discovered that boundaries between enemies could dissolve given sufficient courage and truth. And in her healing sleep, Theline smiled.